Hello and welcome to Representative Gary Glenn Reports. I'm John Perry, and Representative Gary Glenn, it's good to see you back in Lansing.
John, good to see you again, sir.
Welcome back. Along those lines, though, I've been keeping track of you. You have been very busy in your district in recent weeks, doing a lot of activities, doing a lot of listening.
That's true. We weren't in session except for 2 or 3 days in the months of July and August. But that certainly did not mean we weren't busy, that I wasn't busy. And I had days that would go from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, one meeting after the other, continued to keep up the pace of attending township meetings and city council meetings and a lot of school board meetings to report on the education funding issue and the budget for the upcoming year. Went to Farm Bureau banquets in Bay County and Midland County, and that's just went to a fire safety demonstration at Beaver Township Hall put on by the Propane Dealers Association. Just those kinds of events throughout July and August when we weren't in session, primarily in those summer months. But of course now we're back starting up the schedule where we're going to be in Lansing every week, at least 3 days a week from now through the end of the year. And a lot of issues that are now before us. Obviously road funding is going to continue to be a matter of discussion. As you know, one of the first things we did upon resuming legislative session was have a memorial service on 9/11 to memorialize not only the firefighters and police and paramedics who serve us on a daily basis, but also to remember those who have lost their lives either in public safety or in military service since the last 9/11 ceremony. And I had the distinct privilege and sober duty of hosting on the House floor John and Dawn Szymanski, who are the parents of Lance Corporal Stephen Szymanski of Midland, who lost his life in a training exercise in the United States Marine Corps down at Fort Bragg back in October. And we recognized Stephen on the floor, read his name on the Roll of Honor on the floor during the official commemoration service, and were able to host his family, his grandparents, his aunt, his sister, Ashley, in addition to his mom and dad, John and Dawn. So that was certainly a privilege on my part to be able to honor Stephen's memory and to host his family down here at the Capitol for our 9/11 commemoration ceremony. And I know we're going to have some footage where Stephen's father is going to briefly comment about that ceremony.
Hi, this is Representative Gary Glenn, representing Midland and Bay counties. Today here in the Capitol, we're going to have a memorial service for 9/11. And as part of that service, we're honoring not only first responders, but individuals from my legislative district who have given their life in the service of our country in the past year. And I want to give an opportunity to the parents, any other family member who wishes, of Lance Corporal Stephen Szymanski of Midland, United States Marine who lost his life in the service of our country in this past year since the last 9/11 observance.
Thank you, Representative Glenn. My name is John Szymanski. I just wanted to say that we miss our son dearly. We're very proud of him. And we're very honored that Representative Glenn had us here to recognize Stephen. He deserves all the credit he can get, and he deserves to be honored in any way possible because he did make the ultimate sacrifice for his country. He loved the Marines. He loved the discipline. And that's about all I can say right now.
If I can add, Semper Fi, Lance Corporal Szymanski. So we'll be back into the studio to continue our program. Thank you.
No surprise, not news to anybody, that the question of the expulsion, or in the case of one, resignation of former Representatives Todd Corser and Cindy Gamrat, was a matter of discussion that was a significant distraction. It got to the point when I was at a Farm Bureau banquet, people didn't want to talk about roads or public policy. They wanted to know how soon is it going to be before you can clean up this mess. And I voted in favor of the expulsion resolution for Representative Gamrat. That was difficult because I had a personal relationship with her and her family in the past. And I would have voted in favor of the expulsion resolution for Representative Courser, but he saw the handwriting on the wall and resigned. And you're going to be able to play an excerpt from my comments on the House floor, because I was asked by the Speaker's office to address the question from a perspective of having known these legislators, in one case very well from a personal perspective, but nonetheless believing that for the sake of returning to the people's business, we should put this behind us, and that the behavior that was admitted to warranted no longer serving in the State House of Representatives. Disappointing as that was, to see that opportunity to advance limited government, lower taxes, less government spending, liberty, the principles of liberty advanced. These two legislators had the same opportunity as the other 108 of us did to use these positions to advance the causes that they believed in. And I was frankly distressed that the end result was they squandered those opportunities. So it was very disappointing, as I said in my comments on the House floor, which you'll excerpt here in a minute. It was a bitter duty, but one that I thought was absolutely necessary. And I was disappointed that because the Democrats refused to go along on the merits of the resolutions before us, it took us 16 hours on the floor of the House of Representatives to resolve this, when it should have taken 30 minutes at most. And yet there was some attempt to score political points or play gotcha with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, when all of us that were looking at the merits, difficult as it was, were simply trying as best we could, as fast as we could, to get this behind us and resolve us. But after 16 hours, the Democrats finally relented. All of the investigation, 800 and some pages, was made public, which means it was public and available to any law enforcement agency. And in fact, the Attorney General and the state police, as of this moment, are still conducting a police investigation to see if there was any kind of criminal activity that was involved. But at minimum, the Constitution of the state of Michigan empowers the legislature to make its own judgment about the fitness of members of the legislature. This has nothing to do with where people stand on an issue or ideology. I am as conservative as they come in the Michigan House of Representatives. I'm not going to be expelled. It had nothing whatsoever to do with where these legislators stood on any issue. I agreed with them on many issues. It'd be a notable exception if I disagreed with them from a philosophical standpoint. But that had nothing to do with the motivation as to why they are no longer members of the legislature, as sad an outcome and tragic as it was for them and their families. I'm happy for the sake of their families that this is not going to continue to be a steady drip, drip, drip. Anyway, that has been put behind us. I voted in favor of expulsion when the one resolution came up. Would have voted in favor of expelling the other, except that he resigned first.
I think damage is done to some pretty important values that I believe in. I'm a guy that is a conservative. I believe in limited government and the cause of liberty, and I believe the longer that those words and values are associated with the behavior that's been put before us, as evident has been admitted to in the media, the more damage is done to those principles, whether you share those with me or not. Frankly, one thing that I don't think incensed is too strong a word. Each one of us sitting on this floor is one of 110 people out of 10 million who are given the rare and privileged opportunity to take things in which we strongly believe, our passions, and attempt to persuade other policymakers that they ought to become law. I think this is a sacred duty and obligation, but it's certainly a privilege. It's one that those of us who are conservative can use to advance our principles, and those who have different principles can use to advance theirs. But two legislators who share my general value system, in my opinion, have squandered that rare opportunity to have impact for the things they believe. I believe as long as this issue goes on, the institution of the House of Representatives will be damaged further in the public eye. Somebody said, what we do not condemn, we condone. Whether that be true or not, certainly I think that is the public's impression. Is this a distraction to the people's work? I observe that our friends in the media are here in volume today, not because we were honoring first responders and the families of those who have given their lives in the defense of this country, but because of this issue. When I go to public events in my district, people want to talk about this and not all of the other weighty issues that make up the people's work. We know what's right and we know what's wrong. We're not often called upon to vote on something like that. We can disagree on policy. I haven't heard anybody say anywhere in this body that there's any disagreement about what we would universally agree is right and wrong. And I want it to end today because I care about these families. We have a duty to their constituents. I care about this state. And that verse I said a minute ago about what I love, I might rebuke, it's motivated not only by love for people I've known for years and their families, but love of my country and for our constitutional republic based on consent of the governed. And goodness, folks, shouldn't it be our job to try to restore public faith? And we have an opportunity to do that today. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, as painful and bitter a duty as this is, to join me in voting in favor of both resolutions of expulsion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In terms of getting back to the people's business, you and I have talked throughout the year about energy policy reform, and people who've watched the earlier versions of this report, Glenn reports, we've talked about that on several occasions. Well, now it's time for action. We're beyond the point of talk. We're now getting to the point for action. And one of the things that I did in a news conference just today was to introduce a comprehensive free market, competition, consumer choice-based energy reform package, which among other things is going to say that every public school and every college and university and every state and local government building and every hospital would be free to choose to buy electricity from the cheapest source they can find it and save taxpayers tens of millions, eventually hundreds of millions of dollars. But it's a comprehensive plan. It would also allow Midland Cogeneration Venture to competitively bid against the major utilities like Detroit Edison and Consumers Energy. Anytime the Public Service Commission identified a new need for more plants to generate electricity capacity. And I think you're going to show some footage from the comments I made this morning at the news conference. We had representatives of school districts. We had the president of the Michigan Grocers Association. We had local government representatives who were there, all to say that they supported this legislation to expand consumer choice and save taxpayers money and bring down the cost of electricity for everybody in Michigan, because the same principles of competition that we know work to bring prices down throughout the rest of our economy, I am persuaded also apply to buying electricity. And just as an example, Bay City schools that I represent, Bay City Western, they save $200,000 a year, but every school district in Midland County is prohibited by the current law from accessing those kind of savings. And similarly, Saginaw Valley State University saves $200,000 a year by buying their electricity from Wolverine Power, which is a Michigan company. I'm going to tour that in the morning, their new power plant up in Elmira. And yet Northwood University and Delta College are prohibited by law from being able to buy electricity from an alternative provider. And I was happy to see a representative for Northwood University representing the president, Keith Priddy, was there this morning at the news conference. So you're going to show some footage from that as well. That's going to be an example of us getting back to the people's business, going back in session, and also putting behind us the distractions and getting down to the brass tacks of reforming Michigan's energy policy for the future, making us more attractive to new business and industry and job creation by bringing cheaper electricity rates to all consumers throughout Michigan. So look, we'll share with the viewers some of the things I said at the news conference this morning, and we'll look forward to being back with you in another couple of weeks.
And the package that we're going to introduce today is free market-based, it's competition-based, and it's consumer choice-based, which is going to save our taxpayers tens of millions of dollars and give people the freedom to choose. What this means is making Michigan more attractive to new business and industry. I heard the CEO of Dow Chemical give a speech recently in which he said that they would continue to have operations in Michigan because it's part of a heritage they're proud of. But if we wanted to know why some of the facilities they were locating in Houston were going there instead of in Midland, Michigan, he said, give us more competitive energy rates. So this is about not only preserving but creating new Michigan jobs. And this arbitrary 10% cap is holding back job creation. Now, I don't blame the utilities for acting in the best interest of their stockholders. If you were a business, you heard Mr. Brand make reference to having the law put some restrictions on his competitors, if I understood him correctly. If you're in a business and you could get the government to pass a law that gave you a 90% guarantee of the market, well, who wouldn't take that? Good work if you can get it. But is that in the best interest of Michigan ratepayers and taxpayers? We want to give our school districts choice. We want to give colleges and universities choice. We want to give hospitals choice. And all of that is included in this package, a Michigan Energy Freedom Reform package that'll put ratepayers and taxpayers first by providing and protecting for continued electrical choice. Let me give you a rundown on the process. These folks who are standing here behind me and about 24 more have met on 4 different occasions, have drafted the legislation that is part of this package. It's our intention that it be comprehensive. So let me give you some examples of what our freedom package would entail. Taxpayer-funded facilities, including the state and all of its political subdivisions, cities and counties and townships, would be free to access electricity choice without counting against the 10% cap. And let me give you an example. Oakland County says it saves $500,000 a year because they're able to access electricity choice now. And yet Midland County, that I represent, is prohibited by the current law from accessing that same type of savings for taxpayers. We're also talking about making sure Michigan schools, not just those who currently have it, and we estimate that it's about 40% of all public schools in the state. And this issue was recast, as far as I'm concerned, when the business agent for the Clarkston Public Schools testified some 3 or 4 months ago and indicated that if they lost electricity choice, since they saved $350,000 a year, they'd have to lay off 5 teachers. So that's what we're talking about, what's at issue today. In the district that I represent, Bay City Schools, for example, saves $200,000 a year, but every school district in Midland County is prohibited by law from saving taxpayers money on their electricity bill. This will also include all colleges and universities. Now, some of our colleges and universities have their own power plants, but for example, again in my district, Saginaw Valley State buys its electricity from a Michigan energy producer, Wolverine Power, and saves $200,000 a year. And yet Delta College and Northwood College in Midland are prohibited by law from accessing the same type of savings for the supporters of those colleges and universities. We would also allow, because the state spends hundreds of millions of dollars in Medicaid money on health care, this bill would also allow all our hospitals to be able to access choice, and again, not count against the 10% cap. The estimate is that Beaumont hospitals alone would save $3 million a year. So by protecting electrical choice, we help hold down the cost of health care. And so I think one of the clear messages we want to leave here today with is if you support electricity choice, you have to oppose both the current Senate legislation and the new House substitutes that were just approved yesterday. If you want to move in the right direction of more choice, more jobs for Michigan, more savings for taxpayers, then we want to expand choice with this free enterprise package. If we want to make Michigan more attractive to new business and industry and investment, if we want to save taxpayers tens of millions and over time hundreds of millions and eventually billions of dollars, we ought to expand electricity choice, not put restrictions on it.